Welcome back to our final segment today on disability and employment. In this segment, while we just finished talking about strategies, solutions, and so forth, I want to spend time right now talking about accommodations, because that is the one area that I think creates the most confusion for people and is one of the most important things for us to think about. Because the individual who has the skills for the job, who is disclosed, who need something to be able to do their job well, it's an obligation to be able to provide that. And there are a variety of different ways it could be. From the examples might be written instructions versus oral instructions, might be more flexible work hours, could be something like job sharing, so that where the job that the person was hired for, they can do everything but say one or two things, but yet they have other skills that perhaps somebody over here could take and share with. So creating that opportunity. From an employer standpoint, again, one of the things we worry about a lot is cost. People worry about the cost of accommodations being very expensive, and yet many accommodations are free or certainly less than $100. And in fact, again, it's from 2005, so it's a little dated in terms of time, but there was a national survey done, and the average cost for accommodations was only around $600, and that spans the entire range of people with a whole variety of disabilities. One thing that I would ask you to do as an activity for this week is that there's a website. It's called the Job Accommodation Network. You'll have the link to that, and people just shorten that to JAN. And this website, the JAN website, you can go to it and say, okay, I've got this disability and here's the job. What are potential accommodations? And so as one of your learning activities this week, that's exactly what I'd like you to do. I would like you to go to this website, identify a disability, and then look at what are the various accommodations that people have already come up with. Because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, and this is a tremendous resource for anyone who's listening to this, as well as anyone in the world, to look at and say, oh, okay, this is how we might deal with this. Then the last thing I would like to say on this is just the idea of, from an employment standpoint, how might you develop a disability-friendly workplace? I've already argued that there's value to it, there's a good source, good pool of employees, good from a diversity standpoint, it's good from a PR standpoint, if nothing else, right? But how might you make that work site more welcoming? And certainly ideas include, make a corporate commitment that this is something that we want to do, this is something we value, this is something that's important to us. And if so, then we need to educate our staff about disabilities. So even using something like this MOOC to, whether it's this lesson or the entire 10 lessons that we have here, educate, demystify disability for people. Provide continuing information, certainly even potentially support groups within the company depending on the size of it, and provide accessible facilities. As you do remodeling, think about how we might remodel, how you might construct something that follows principles of universal design, which we've talked about before and we'll talk about later, but making things that are accessible for people. And then when accommodations do come up, fulfill them. You have a responsibility as well as a kind of a moral imperative to do that. Because by hiring people with disabilities, you do show that commitment. You do show that commitment to diversity. So in summary, within this segment, we've talked about accommodations. We've talked about creating an inclusive workplace environment. And as the overall lesson, we really want to emphasize that idea that employment is huge. It's huge for all of us, whether you do or do not have a disability. If you do have a disability, though, you're likely to face a number of additional barriers to employment, as evidenced by the number of people with disabilities who are employed versus those without. The barriers that exist are both at the individual level, from a financial standpoint, a role model standpoint, an experience standpoint. You've got barriers at the employer level. There are a number of barriers that exist out there. So with that, I will end today's lesson. And looking forward to next week. Our next lesson will be a summary of all that we've covered up to this point, and we'll have a very heavy emphasis on hearing from our guest speakers as they talk about, from their perspectives, a number of solutions and strategies that, if put in place, would make for a much more inclusive society and a much more positive experience. Thank you.